welcome back to Underreported Stories, where I cover the news that CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News fail to report on or don't report on enough. And I wanted to start off today's show by leveling with, well, just like my entire audience, okay? Because I've been getting a lot of feedback from people following my rebrand, and probably the most prevalent feedback I've gotten is, Chrissy, please focus on political stories over culture war stories. And I get it, right? Like my feel here is a lot more highbrow. Therefore, I should focus on highbrow stories. And while I definitely appreciate the feedback, this channel, I believe, is going to be the most successful when I pick stories that interest me. So sometimes those stories are going to be highly political. Like today, we have 4 highly political stories about the White House, the USAID, important political updates, right? But we also have 2 stories today that are about the culture war. And that's because I very much believe that politics and culture are intrinsically linked. So I don't think we would be seeing the success of Trump 3.0 without the culture behind it. So some episodes are going to be very culture heavy, some are going to be politically heavy, and you can pick and choose which stories you want to listen to and use the chapter feature to not only pick the episodes, but pick which parts of the episodes you want to listen to as well. So to be clear, I appreciate your feedback, but I will not be swayed on which stories I cover. I pick them because I like them, and if you like me, I think you'll like these stories, right? But anyway, I would be remiss if I didn't talk right off the gate about acknowledging that both Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. have been confirmed to their respective positions. First off, big congrats to them, that's awesome. Simultaneously, I want to address this overarching feeling that I'm sure a lot of us are feeling, and that is like, this feeling of overwhelming excitement, but also generally just very overwhelmed. I personally feel very overwhelmed by the news cycle recently because the Trump administration is so fast, so furious, and is doing so much so quickly. I mean, it's great, right? Like they had a plan that they set out before, and when they got in office, they started doing it. Now, the thing is, I think people thought, oh, this is going to happen for a little while and scale down. I personally don't see it that way. I anticipate that what is happening here is setting a precedent for the incoming cabinet members and staffers. So as RFK gets into the Department of Health and Human Services, as Tulsi Gabbard gets in as DNI director, this is just going to be the beginning. This is seriously just the beginning of the overwhelming feelings. I cannot imagine what the news cycle is going to look like when RFK and DOJ get into the Department of Health and Human Services, okay? The corruption there has yet to be exposed, and that's probably a landmine of explosive corruption stories, if I'm being honest. So I say that to say, buckle up, everybody, because these next few months are going to be wild. And I don't think that once we get through the confirmation processes of Tulsi Gabbard and Linda McMahon, and I literally can see how to spell her name, and I can't speak it through my mouth because I'm just real tired, guys, real tired with this move. Anyway, I just don't think that all of these nominations, once they are confirmed, I do not think that that is the end. I think it is quite literally just the beginning. And that might sound very simplistic to say, but I don't think we quite realize how crazy the news cycle is going to be, which makes me excited. I'm personally buckling up with you guys. Anyway, here's what we've got on our docket for today. Speaking of ramping things up, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced the DOJ's first pivotal investigation into the sanctuary status of New York. Plus, we've got an update on USAID's funding decisions back from the 90s that are now having implications today, and Disney's decision to kind of turn away from DEI. Plus, at the end of today's show, I have an interview with the co-chair of the GOP's Youth Council. His name is CJ Pearson, and I'm going to talk to him about the litigation against New York Magazine and where he sees the future of the GOP. That'll be tagged on at the end of today's show. So, without further ado, let's get into the 5 underreported stories that you need to know. Today's show is brought to you by my merch line, Based. I'm an independent journalist, and the best way to support this show is by purchasing a hat, a hoodie, or the new Based Not Basic tote, or really any item from the Apparel collection. Instead of asking you guys for donations to fund my independent journalism, my business partner and I created a line of merch called Based Apparel. Based means you're the opposite of woke. It means you're based in logic, you're based in truth. You get it. Head over to basedinlogic.com to check out our latest apparel. My personal favorite right now is the Based two-tone shirt. And remember, when you buy merch, you are directly supporting this show. Thank you, friends. The Department of Justice announced a lawsuit against New York Governor Kathy Hochul and the state's Attorney General Letitia James over the city's sanctuary status, also the state's green light law, which allows undocumented individuals to obtain driver's license. So the lawsuit from the DOJ claims that New York is prioritizing illegal aliens over Americans, and also claimed that the law is a, quote, frontal assault on federal immigration laws. Now, I think for the sake of clarity, it is important to clarify the difference between undocumented and illegal immigrants, because there is a difference, okay? An undocumented person is technically not a criminal. Hear me out. I know everyone's going to go up in the comment section and start freaking the fuck out. Give me a second, okay? An undocumented person is technically not a criminal, because coming over here legally and then overstaying a visa is technically a civil issue. And civil and criminal issues are two separate things in our legal system. Now, here's where I'm on your team. While that technicality is important, we, in our everyday language, we don't speak the differentiation between civil and criminal crimes. We just call them crimes. If you're caught speeding, you don't say, oh, I got a civil infraction. No, in layman's terms, we all just call that a crime, right? You broke the law, that's a crime. That is how our brains operate in normal society. That's okay. At the same time, we do just have to caveat, when we're talking about the legal system, the legal technicalities here. So that is, I say that to explain to you that I think is going to kind of be the difficulty, and that might stand in the way of the DOJ here, is that this green light law specifically allows New York residents age 16 plus to apply for a standard non-commercial driver's license that cannot be used for federal purposes, but anyone, regardless of their citizenship or lawful status, can apply for one, right? The carve out of, not to be used for federal purposes. The law is intended for people who are violating the law in a civil manner, not a criminal manner. Those are the arguments that the left and leadership in New York are going to utilize. I just want to give you all the information so that you can be prepared for it when these conversations take place and when people start to push back on this, because this is going to go through the legal system. Letitia James has indicated that she's going to fight back. Kathy Hochul has indicated that she is going to fight back. The state of New York is not going to take this lying down. Now, I personally believe that anyone with a brain can see how this program is just rife for fraud and future voter fraud. And not only are the logistics of this program problematic in and of themselves, the sanctuary status of the state is also very problematic for the Trump administration trying to get anything done. So the sanctuary status of the state, they will not cough up any information. They have all the information on these illegal aliens, right? Illegal, undocumented, whatever you'd like to call them. They have this information, the state, but they refuse to cough it up to the federal government, which some legal scholars believe is a direct violation of what is called the Supremacy Clause, which basically says that when a state has one priority and the federal government has another, we traditionally defer to the policy priorities of the federal government. And when I say some legal scholars believe this, I do mean legal scholars on CNN are even admitting this, right? A legal scholar named Eli Honing went on CNN's The Source with Caitlin Collins and said this: I actually think DOJ has strong grounds here legally for what they're asking the court to do, or what it appears they're asking the court to do. Essentially, they're saying New York State has a bunch of laws that inhibit us, that get in the way of us enforcing federal immigration law. There's a New York State law, which is the green light law, that says that if immigration authorities ask for the DMV information, for the address, for the motor vehicle information of a illegal alien, A, it should not be provided to the federal authorities. That's what this law says. And B, the state authorities should inform, notify, tip off the person who's being asked about. Yes, New York is literally saying, not only are we not going to help you, we are going to actively help the people who are breaking the law. And then he goes on to give my case for the supremacy clause, which is that, when the feds and the state have conflicting interest, of course, we are going to traditionally defer to the state. And that is why this person, it might be Ellie Honing, I think that's it. Ellie Honing is saying that, I think Pam Bondi, despite what he's dubbing atmospheric missteps, has a pretty strong case here on the legal merits. So you don't see CNN admitting that every single day now, do ya? Per our usual arrangement, I will keep you posted on any updates on this story. All right, let's get into our next story, which is that as DOJ continues its push to audit our federal government spending, we are uncovering so many nutty stories, like truly nutty, including that the USAID, our Agency for International Development, funded the college tuition for a key al-Qaeda terrorist. At first, I saw this headline and I was like, oh my gosh, like, what crazy spin is this? There's no way this... No, this happened. Let me explain. USAID funded tuition for a man named Anwar al-Awlaki, Awlaki. I'm just going to say al-Awlaki because there's just too, the wall, my mouth doesn't move like that, okay? So USAID funded tuition for al-Awlaki through a fraudulent exchange visa application back in 1990. So al-Awlaki falsely claimed to be a Yemeni national to receive full funding for his education at Colorado State University, even though this dude was born in New Mexico. Sorry, different, very different. So he's American born. He proclaimed to be a Yemeni citizen. Then he applied for a USAID program that funded college tuitions for foreign citizens, which, side note, what the hell are we paying for the college tuition of foreigners while hundreds of thousands of Americans are riddled with college debt? But anyway, we now have uncovered that the USAID, who helped fund the education of this individual, actually helped fund the education of a terrorist, okay? Al-Awlaki was a key figure in al-Qaeda. He was considered, or he is considered, but was because he's dead, but he is considered the godfather of digital jihad. And his writings, the writings that we hear about when people get radicalized online to join ISIS or al-Qaeda, they are directly linked to al-Awlaki, okay? His writings, again, directly linked to radicalizing Americans to al-Qaeda's cause via the internet. He's also considered instrumental in killing 13 people at a U.S. Army post in Texas in 2009. And yet, we paid for his tuition so that he could become such a wonderful and thoughtful writer. By the way, he's not a wonderful or a thoughtful writer. He's a psychopath terrorist. That was a joke about the way the New York Times or somebody would write about that. Anyway, the CIA back in 2011 put a target on him. He was basically put on a death list, and he was ultimately killed by a U.S. drone strike. Now, I think stories like this lend credibility to the argument that a systemic audit of the federal government is so necessary. I don't entirely buy into the idea that all bureaucracy is inherently evil. I think that some very small portion of the bureaucracy was created to make government more efficient or help more people. But as it has grown in its size and scope, that bureaucracy has become so rife with corruption. It dates back like so many years. I'm like trying to do the math in my head, like at least 30. No, probably way more, okay? The fact that an agency could not do a mere fact check to confirm whether a U.S. citizen was truthful on an application about his identity, the fact that we dole out thousands and thousands of dollars to U.S. school tuition for somebody who lied on their application, that lying on a federal application was not disqualifying. The beliefs espoused by this person were not questioned. That the federal government is legitimately awarding full scholarships to foreigners while Americans struggle. Like, I cannot believe there are people out here who question wanting to end this, wanting to at least audit this and get the truth out about this. And by the way, on Tuesday's show, I was kind of making a bit of hoopla about the fact that Elon Musk and DOJ, they have this rush to get information out, and that has resulted in what I was calling shoddy fact-checking, and then some incorrect information that was getting out there. Now, I was watching the press briefing from Karoline Leavitt, the White House press briefing yesterday on Wednesday, and she provided screenshots of the applications, the programs, the funding, basically all the proof that I was looking for. But then, after this press briefing, a journalist put out this USAID funding for the al-Qaeda terrorist on X. And I just want to say this is the gold standard. This is what I'm looking for. When we put out claims from the DOJ account or from Elon Musk's account, I just want a screenshot attached. That's all I'm looking for. I'm not denying that there's truth to the claim. I actually don't even know if the media, and I hate the media, I don't even know if they're trying to deny the claim. I think there is a standard in journalism that requires us to find the primary source to verify the statements made by DOJ and X. And I think the White House, DOJ, Elon Musk, etc. would be in such a great position if they would just put screenshots like this on all of their tweets. That would be great, okay? Anyway, moving on. ICE Boston arrested a Guatemalan illegal alien charged with multiple counts of aggravated and forcible child assault in Massachusetts. I feel like I was smiling as I was saying that. The smile was intended for the capturing of this man, not for his disgusting and horrible actions. Anyway, ICE Boston was forced to investigate and arrest this man on its own without any help from the state. Because here's where it gets wild. A Massachusetts Superior Court ignored ICE's request to detain this guy and get information on him because of the state's sanctuary policy, of course. Basically, this criminal was in jail. ICE then requested to detain him after he was arrested for heinous crimes. Like, hey, he's already in jail. Can we just snag him from you? Massachusetts then let this man out on bail and refused to not even comply, but just respond to ICE because of sanctuary policies that they have in place, okay? I think that there's this general feeling that it is a political opinion that sanctuary policies are helping criminal pedos get away with crimes while children suffer, sorry. I don't think that's a political opinion. It's just a fact when you see a story like this. Now, I can't say it in every instance, but I think it is factual to say sanctuary state policies have helped criminal pedos get away with crimes while children suffer. There's nothing incorrect about that statement. Now, ICE put out an entire official statement with all of the information. I'm going to read that for you right here. So an ICE field officer director said that this is exactly the type of alien that we are targeting in our worst first policy. He posed a significant danger to the children of Massachusetts, and we will not tolerate a threat in the community. Here's kind of the guidelines now, or the timeline, not the guidelines, the timeline of all of this. Now, this takes place over a very long period of time, okay? This man came into the U.S. at an unknown date, at an unknown location, and without being inspected, admitted, paroled. We have no idea when, still to this day. Now, I've said now like 80 bajillion times in this episode, and I'm so sorry. It's just like a weird habit. I'll work on it. It's like when you say like a bunch of times and someone tells you stop saying like. I will try to stop saying now. I sound like a broken record. Anyway. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, the timeline is very clear here. Fernando was arraigned by a district in Massachusetts back in 2005 for leaving the scene of an accident, so he's already caused problems dating back to 2005, but the court didn't convict him of that until 2012, which took 7 years for some sort of traffic accident to take place. Conviction of that. He then was arraigned again in 2022 for assault of a child by force. The court later dismissed the case due to an indictment in the Superior Court. ICE lodged an immigration detainer against Fernando back in 2022 with the Essex County Court of Corrections. However, this man was then let go. The state superior court ignored the immigration detainer, did not respond to ICE, and they let him off on pretrial conditions back in October of 2022. ICE officers then served him with a notice to appear before a Department of Justice immigration judge following his arrest, and he now remains in ICE custody because ICE can now go after these people. Again, this is the policy working. We are getting the biggest problems out first. By the way, since all of these mass deportations began, I actually started compiling a joke list of people that I would like to deport if I were put in charge of mass deportations. And I figured just to lighten the mood, because this episode has gotten very heavy, I would read that list to you. So these are people I would like to deport. First off, influencers who chew into their microphones to sound like Alex Cooper. You're not cute. You're not doing ASMR. You're just annoying. And I've never scrolled past videos so fast in my life than when I hear influencers talk like they're chewing into their microphones. Jail, Guantanamo Bay at a minimum, okay? If not, I'm deporting you to Gaza. Next is the University of Michigan fans. That's nothing personal to you as a person. You just have horrible taste in sports teams. Next is people who FaceTime in public without headphones. It's 2025. Get a pair of headphones, even if you get them for free on a Delta flight, okay? We're not doing that anymore. It's ghetto. It's ghetto. Next, we have people who say they don't like the taste of junk food. Listen, I am a Maha girly as well, okay? I have a loaf of sourdough sitting on my oven right now. I get it. You're healthy. I'm healthy. That doesn't mean we can't admit that it doesn't taste really good, okay? Sometimes shit tastes good, even if it's really bad for you. You don't have to pretend you're better than us, okay? I also would like to deport parents who say or who refuse to use the word no with their kids. I don't need your child who doesn't understand the meaning of the word no growing up in the same society as my child or my future child. So, yeah, we're gonna get rid of you too. And finally, this one I do think we could fix quite quickly. The girls on TikTok who do cooking videos and then they call all of their food creamy, even if it's literally a dry piece of chicken. That one I think we could fix very quickly if you just ban everybody on TikTok who uses the word creamy. That's it. Okay. Anyway, if you have any suggestions to my beautiful list, feel free to drop them in the comments, but I won't be changing anything. I won't be deleting anything, but I'm happy to make other additions. If you love this podcast, then you will absolutely love the Underreported Stories Substack. It's an email sent straight to your inbox Monday through Friday. You'll get an in-depth analysis of stories that are underreported, hot takes from me on the biggest news of the day, and Underreported Wrapped, where I'll let you in on personal updates, big news that flew under the radar, and you'll get a few pictures from America's Goodest Boy, my dog, Harper. Check out the link in the description to subscribe for free, and while you're down there, be sure to give this episode a thumbs up or a 5-star review. Next up, Disney is making some changes to its DEI policies, most notably, and maybe my personal favorite, is that it's updating its content advisory disclaimers that it put the company on older films like Dumbo and Peter Pan. So I'm going to read you the original warnings. They're so ridiculously stupid, but this is the original warning that told viewers that the film included, quote, negative depictions and or mistreatment of peoples or cultures. These stereotypes were wrong then and are wrong now. Rather than remove this content, we want to acknowledge its harmful impact, learn from it, and spark conversation to create a more inclusive future together. This obviously must have come from some sort of DEI specialist who wrote it. Very, very woke it comes across. It reads very, very woke. And DEI specialists must have insisted that this go in. But the films still have a content advisory on them. So Peter Pan, Dumbo, they still have a content advisory read. It just reads a lot more normal. It says, this program is presented as originally created and may contain stereotypes or negative depictions. Great. I have no problem with that, actually. I feel like a lot of people are just like black or white. They're like, oh, just get rid of it. We're smart enough. We can understand. No, actually, I kind of wish they would do this with more films. Like, if it's got gender identity in the film, like, give me a little forewarning that something crazy is going to happen, right? And I do remember, again, I might just be from a softer generation, but I do remember watching Peter Pan back when this DEI statement became a thing and was added a couple years ago. And I was watching it with my husband, and we were like watching the movie, and it's like, okay, the statement is woke, but there is not entirely wrong that like in modern day America, these stereotypes are considered very offensive. And again, I grew up in a softer generation, so I get that. I'm not offended personally by it, but I'm also like, hey, I realize the stereotypes didn't benefit the movie in any like extreme way, and I get how people would feel like, whoa, that's not cool in 2025. So I think changing the way that we talk about this and just being like, hey, as a heads up, there are some stereotypes in here that aren't cool now, but they were cool then. Great. Like, I actually don't have a problem with a statement that says times have changed. Before you watch this movie, just know what you're signing up for. Cool. Great. I'm fine with that. I just thought the woke, we are going to spark conversation and change. Dumbo's not going to do that, okay? Peter Pan, not going to do that. Times change and evolve. They do, but we can't not enjoy culture that was very formative to so many people solely because it's not 2025 inclusivity approved, right? There's some other updates from Disney as well. Another update being that there was an internal memo sent out to Disney employees stating that executives' compensation would no longer be focused on diversity and inclusion, but instead executives are going to receive raises based on merit. Wow, scary. It's scary. You know why it's so scary? It's scary for the woke left, who is actually super racist and thinks that Black people can't achieve this, even though Black people are perfectly capable of rising through the ranks based on merit. Just as a heads up, just in case the left needed to know that. The other Disney update that is here in this memo that was sent out was that they've nixed a 2021 project titled Reimagine Tomorrow. Again, this was launched to kind of amplify underrepresented voices. I don't know why Disney thought that was like a huge necessity. Try making a movie without remaking it or turning it into a live action. Try doing that. Try making a good movie. Maybe then we can talk about amplifying underrepresented voices or something like that, right? I should note that all of these changes are great. I'm totally on board with it. However, Disney is not like completely unwokeified now that they've done this. It's still got its very nutty belonging groups. And let's be honest, they haven't really learned anything. They're still going to pander to the Hollywood left. They're still going to remain out of touch with the average American. They're still going to remake and do live actions because they cannot come up with anything of substance in 2025. I see no indication that Disney is going to radically change. All we've seen thus far is that Disney is getting rid of its most outward-facing DEI programs and statements. And of course, I think that's very good news. But a lot of what is happening in light of this ban on affirmative action is that these programs aren't going away. They're getting rebranded and simply becoming more quiet. And I actually think it's harder to catch the wrongdoings of a company or a university because it's no longer acceptable or legal to put those standards out to the world. But those standards may still very well operate quietly under the table. And so I wanted to say, if you work at a company and you want to blow the whistle on existing DEI measures in hopes of exacting change, email me and I will keep you entirely anonymous. You will not lose your job at all, but you can always blow the whistle or leak things to me. You can email me, Chrissy, CHRISSY, at Underreported Stories, the name of this podcast, all in one word, .co. That's co, not com. It's Chrissy at underreportedstories.co, okay? Email me with proof of what is going on, and I will do my best to get that story out there. Those stories deserve more information. I used to have people whistleblowing to me when I was a reporter, and I want to do a lot more of that come in 2025 and with this rebrand. Anyway, let's get into our fifth and final story, which is that the White House blocked an Associated Press reporter from the Oval Office press briefing over its refusal to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Now, it is being, I wouldn't say reported, but insinuated that the Associated Press has been barred from White House press briefings or White House press altogether. That is not true, okay? It's a downright lie. They are not welcome at the President of the, or they are not welcome to the President of the United States Oval Office briefing. One, singular one. Watch Karoline Leavitt in her press briefing from yesterday explain what actually happened.
Interview. Which White House official made the decision to bar the AP reporter from the Oval Office and the diplomatic reception room last night?
Well, first of all, let me just set the record straight. It is a privilege to cover this White House. It's a privilege to be the White House press secretary. And nobody has the right to go into the Oval Office and ask the President of the United States questions. That's an invitation that is given. And there are hundreds of outlets on this campus, many of you in this room who don't have the privilege of being part of that pool every single day and getting to ask the President questions. We reserve the right to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office, and you all have credentials to be here, including the Associated Press, who is in this briefing room today.
So after that interaction, CNN's Caitlin Collins, that's the woman who asked the first question, she followed up by asking how the White House squares free speech with barring a member of the AP from a press briefing. Watch Karoline's response.
Isn't it retaliatory in nature is the argument, because the reason that the AP was barred, which they said was because they're not using the phrase Gulf of America, they're using Gulf of Mexico in line with their standards. And so the question here is this setting a precedent that this White House will retaliate against reporters who don't use the language that you guys believe reporters should use? And how does that align with the First Amendment commitment that you were just talking about?
I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is. The Secretary of Interior has made that the official designation in the Geographical Identification Name Server. And Apple has recognized that. Google has recognized that. Pretty much every other outlet in this room has recognized that body of water as the Gulf of America. And it's very important to this administration that we get that right, not just for people here at home, but also for the rest of the world. Sure.
Withholding my personal opinions on this whole thing, I find it rather, let's say, courageous of the media to insist that the Trump administration is against free speech when the previous administration revoked countless press passes, refused to answer basic questions or do any media, and simultaneously, the current White House has opened its doors to creators like myself and expanded the press briefing to more free speech-oriented platforms. Actually, ironically, sitting in the press briefing yesterday was the CEO of Rumble, a free speech platform dedicated. You could be watching it on Rumble right now, this show. The media are simply mad that there are consequences to their political preferences in their so-called journalism, right? They would prefer that we just continue calling things the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Mexico instead of the Gulf of America, because they just want to keep the status quo. And so they're not actually mad that there are consequences for telling lies. They're mad because the lies don't align with their political preferences, if that makes any sense at all. But anyway, before we wrap up today's show, I've been keeping you all updated about this viral story wherein my friend CJ Pearson announced he's suing New York Magazine over its misleading article, speaking of fake news. Now, CJ took the time to explain his side of the story in a quick interview that we did yesterday. Here it is. With me today is CJ Pearson. He's the co-chair of the GOP Youth Advisory Council and a very sweet friend for joining us today. Hey, CJ, welcome to Underreported Stories.
Chrissy, Clark, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I want to give the audience a little bit of background as to why I'm having you on. So earlier this year, you hosted a wildly successful event, my favorite party of inauguration weekend. It was called the Power 30 Awards. And the whole point of it was to celebrate the influencers who directly impacted the 2024 victory of Donald Trump. And there were obviously going to be reporters there covering the event. We all knew that. We saw people from the Free Press. We saw Taylor Lorenz there in her sparkly mask. There was friendly media. There was unfriendly media. It was a whole thing. But the controversy of this party really came in when the New York Magazine wrote an article titled "The Cruel Kids Table" and seemingly intentionally left you out of the story and pretty much every Black, Hispanic, racial minority that was there at the party out of this story. So when this magazine article first came out, what was your initial reaction to the cover?
Initially, I didn't notice actually the cropping out of the African Americans and of the people of color from the cover until it was pointed out later on social media. As I read the story, it was a typical hit piece. I've, been the subject of those since I was 12 years old, starting off in the conservative movement. So, a little bit of pushback from the liberal media isn't something that, spooks me or makes me too upset these days. But what does make me upset is outright deceit and deception, which is exactly what this is. They sought to perpetuate this narrative that this was some racially homogenous group of MAGA cultists coming together to celebrate the new dawn of America. And they wanted it to sound sadistic. They wanted it to sound nefarious, but it was anything but that. You were there, you can attest to it, and so can everyone else who is at that celebration. It was a celebration of joy, something of which I thought that the Democrats were largely in support of, or at least Kamala Harris would have led us to believe it, but I guess not, because they saw this picture of young, healthy, hot, and handsome young people celebrating the new golden age of America, and it made them actually so angry that they went to such lengths to lie about everyone in the room. And I gotta tell you, the way in which it blew up in their face, I've gotta say, I don't think they'll be doing something like this ever again.
Right. What was the point when you were logistically thinking this through? Like, what is the point of letting unfriendly media in? I think a lot of people are like, well, why reward these people with access? What was the thought process behind that for you?
Well, Brock was someone I'm not familiar with. I wasn't aware that he actually was going to be in attendance. He was invited, by my co-host, Raquel DeBono. But, at the end of the day, I think the overall premise of having unfriendly media there is that we weren't doing anything that we needed to hide. We were, as you acknowledged, we were celebrating the impact that influencers had upon this election, which allowed President Trump to circumvent the corporate media, circumvent the liberal media, and go directly to consumer, go directly to the American people where they increasingly are. Listening to podcasts like yours, scrolling through TikTok, going and watching Instagram Reels, and consuming news and media that way. That was a huge part of the president's overwhelming victory and the mandate he was given by the American people. And so, I wasn't worried about, liberal reporters being there because we weren't doing anything wrong. And the thing is, we were doing so little wrong, they had to construct a wrong. They wanted us to seem as if we were all of a sudden excluding all the black people, excluding all the Hispanic, excluding all
So
the
true.
Jews, but there were many there present. And they went to the lengths that they did by excluding me from the story, excluding people of color from the cover photo, because they realized that there was no there. So they had to create the there, but then people are a lot smarter than they actually thought of. And people very quickly realized that what they were being led to believe just wasn't so at all.
Yeah, and I think with Brock in particular, this is the individual who wrote the New York Magazine article. I kind of told you off air, I haven't said it on air yet, that he had reached out to me and noticed that Turning Point USA at the time was in my bios and reached out to me in hopes of getting access for free to a Turning Point event because I think there was a narrative or an agenda set and he just wanted to get in the door at whatever party was going to allow him in there. And he was going to write the same story no matter whether it was at Power 30, a Turning Point party, the Liberty, like wherever he got in, he had the agenda set. And I think that's why you are now taking legal action against New York Magazine. What does that look like right now?
Yeah, at the end of the day, when I looked at this story, I had to come to the conclusion that I was sick and tired of allowing the liberal media to lie about conservative almost with license and get away with it. They get to slander us as racist and for some odd reason have never been held accountable. That ends today. And so I made the decision to retain legal counsel. Our attorney, Ron Coleman, who has represented former president and current president Donald J. Trump in several legal matters. And he's taking a hard look at what our litigation strategy should be from here. Of course, we're dealing with an unfriendly jury in D.C., probably a similarly unfriendly jury in the state of New York, but thankfully I'm from the great state of Georgia. So we have a little bit of a different roadmap there and landscape there that we're actively exploring. We've already served them with a formal letter of intent to seek litigation. So we've already demanded that they preserve all records. So I really actually want to get down to the bottom of what actually prompted that editorial decision to remove the black people from the cover photo. Was it as innocent as they claim it was? Or is it actually what we think it obviously was? Their attempt to alienate and eliminate all of the black people from actually being a part of this story. I think we ought to know, and I think all of those who actually care about good journalism want to know as well. And so we're looking forward to getting to the bottom of that, and we hope that will be the resolution of this case.
Yeah, as you were speaking, my next kind of follow-up question was how you toggle between, suing the quote free press while simultaneously having a core value of free speech. But I think in and of itself, you've kind of answered it there, that this isn't necessarily about silencing the media. It's actually about exploring and getting the full, diving under and having all the information as to why these decisions are made the way that they are, so that people and readers and people that consume media in general have more of an understanding as to why they think the way they think, because they're being fed a narrative to think the way that they think. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're exactly right. And I think freedom of speech is important, but I don't think freedom of speech comes with the freedom to lie. And so I think that is what's important here. It doesn't come with the freedom to portray people that you don't like in a false light. And so I would, separate the two from this. And at the end of the day, I can take criticism. I can take a hit piece. That is not simply what this was. This was an overt attempt to defame and slander conservatives. And it's not something we should settle for. It's not something we should accept.
No, and how do you square away what you're doing with the new conservatism that you see now? Like, this is really like going hard at people and not taking it rolling over like we used to 4 years ago.
We're in a new era. This is the party of President Donald J. Trump. This isn't the party of Mitt Romney, George Bush, Susan Collins, or any of
Oh,
those squishes anymore. We're going to fight back. We're going to fight back hard, and and it's really truly in the spirit of President Trump. He's taken on CBS and many other publications, and he's done it, and he's won. And I think we ought to do the same.
yeah. One last question for you. I think it's pretty fair to say that while you were honoring all the influencers at the Power 30 Awards, you yourself have become like wildly influential among a generation of our generation. And so my mindset when I see that, I'm like, oh, you'd think someone like yourself would want to be, somewhat of a full-time content creator, but you've really stepped into this interesting role of influencing policy and then also gathering the most influential people together. You're like the glue of conservative influencers. So how do you see your role and the importance of it in this current administration, but also in the future election years?
Well, that means a lot coming from you, Chrissy. And I gotta say, for me, having been in this movement for more than a decade and kind of gotten involved in the influencer space, or for the influencer space was even much of a thing, I kind of see my role as helping incubate the next generation of talent. I think we need to build a deep bench of people who can continue the good work that we're doing every single day. And I also think it's important that we connect our lawmakers, our folks in the administration these days now, with influencers to amplify the good work they're doing to cut through the fake news of the media. But also, too, I think we can have a lot of fun with this. And I think we're going to be doing that with many more events to come. The left wants us to be sad. They want us to be distraught. They want us to be as goalless as they are. We are not going to be. And so I'm super excited about what lies ahead. And there's a lot of work to be done and excited to do it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. If people want to follow you, where can they find you?
They can follow me at VCJ Pearson on all platforms. And Chrissy Clark, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on. I hope you enjoyed that interview. I'm hoping to do a lot more little mini interviews that can add color to my reporting in the coming year. So anyway, if you are a real one and you made it to the end of today's show, will you drop the mouse emoji as an homage to the most famous mouse of all, Mickey Mouse, and Disney's hopeful unwokeification? Thank you, friends. I hope you all have a wonderful Valentine's Day, and I'll see you back here on the podcast on Tuesday. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to subscribe and leave a comment about how beautiful, intelligent, and funny I am. And if you want more content, click right over here for more videos and clips of my show. I'll see you back here next time. Bye!